Hi, welcome to Modern Times with Cal and Mike.
I'm Cal Davenport.
And I'm Mike Doherty. And today we are going to talk about solutions to fossil fuels. And Cal and I are probably for the first time so far in the show going to have two different views regarding this.
We're going to debate a point on energy, and you get to make up your own mind which of us has the better idea.
Mm-hmm. So the overall idea that I've come up with to wean us off of fossil fuels is to add a tax on gasoline and other types of fossil fuels that would start out small and slowly increase over time. So over a number of years, maybe even up to several decades, it would slowly creep up so it wouldn't be a shock on the economy. And basically, the reason why, my reasoning behind this is that I would say I don't want to say it's pretty well known, but it seems to be pretty logical to me that the main switches, the main causes for people to switch over to alternative energy on their own basis is cost and ethical issues, such as people are environmentalists concerned about the environment and the effects that fossil fuels have on them. And in my opinion, the environmental reasons and the people who are concerned about the environment just aren't enough of a driving factor. They're pretty significant. I mean, you're seeing a lot of electric cars and stuff like that, but not as much as costs. In the end, when it starts to affect people's pocketbooks, then they might be more interested in alternative energies for cars or power plants or whatever. And right now, in my opinion, the costs for fossil fuels to be replaced, the costs of fossil fuels right now aren't sufficient enough to make people who are more concerned about their pocketbooks than the environment, to make them really want to switch to alternative energies. And so Cal's going to respond to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, to begin with, we do have taxes on gasoline at the state, local, and federal taxes, and it depends on where you're at exactly what taxes apply to you, but across the board, it averages out to something like 48 cents on the gallon. That's approximately 15.6% of the average gas price. This is as of like last month, the average gas price around the country. So what we're basically dealing with here is in Europe, it's I don't know how many dollars it is, but it's quite a bit more than $3.08 a gallon there, and the taxes are much higher. But there are taxes that already exist on this, and it's higher percentage-wise than actually what like oil companies actually make in profit. So it's a pretty good margin on the gallon of gas. So I imagine that Mike wants a tax separate from this, and I'm not entirely sure. You weren't specific on whether you want that tax.
The tax that I would want would be basically just to increase the cost of fuel overall, to basically directly impact the decision by the consumer.
Okay, so as I understand it, you want it to go up slowly so that it won't be a shock on the economy.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want the taxes, the tax or the gas prices to just suddenly increase.
But you want it to go up faster than people have money to spend on it, basically, as like real income goes up slower than the cost, so that they need to switch away from it because they're going to have to devote a greater portion of their budget to it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's going to get to a certain point where alternative energies already exist. I mean, I think when it comes to power plants and stuff like that, that's going to be a little more difficult to swing, because I don't think that there's really a particular alternative energy that could really fuel the country. I mean, I know solar's great for people who live out in the Southwest. I mean, wind is good. Hydroelectrics is good, but there's some environmental problems that people have cited with that, with fish populations and stuff. I think, to be honest with you, I think nuclear is probably the better way to go. Although that's not necessarily a renewable energy, it's not a fossil fuel. But it creates a storage issue for some people.
And I'm definitely going to have to agree with you on the cost issue, that's what generally determines where people get energy. I mean, we use a lot of fossil fuels today because the costs were made cheap back in the 1800s by John Rockefeller with different transportation methods that basically made it easier for oil to get from one place to another. And I believe it would be the same way in this case, that we will switch to alternate, more efficient ways of using energy when they become available. The problem is I don't know that the government, by taxing, can make it available. I mean, right now, what we're talking about is increasing the cost, so we're basically creating an greater and greater incentive over time to switch. But right now, I mean, the fuel prices do go up faster than the rate of inflation, so people are spending more and more as it is. But you're saying, at this point, that is not enough.
And well, if that's the thing, if global warming really is an issue, I mean, I'm kind of on the fence on that. But I know that acid rain is a problem, and it's a result of CO2 emissions and other emissions from industry. So, in my opinion, acid rain is enough to be concerned about it, to try to change something.
Again, we're dealing with, I think as far as you're concerned, we're talking about America today rather than any other country where they're at industrially. I mean, we in other words, we still could have other countries come in and start and do the same polluting and actually have to go through the same process of technological advance to get where we are.
Yes and no.
I mean, some of our stuff will actually go on the market to them, so they'll be able to skip over because we're kind of forging ahead of everybody else.
And we have, for the most part.
Feasibility-wise, as far as your taxes going up, I think you've got two issues. Number one, you have to know where the tipping point is. In other words, at what cost, at which you have to be able to predict based on supply and demand. At what cost, plus the taxes, is going to make people switch. And number two, how is that going to fit in with when we'll actually have a plausible alternative there? And I don't know, I mean, the policy sounds nice, but I don't think it's that we can actually guess well enough to not have the policy become a problem.
Yeah,
you understand where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah. We fortunately don't have the time to argue that right now.
Right.
But, I mean, this ties in what we had talked about earlier with power plants, and statistically, again, concerning greenhouse gases and the pollution in the atmosphere, power plants are far more responsible for that than automobiles. Although I'm sure as the number of automobiles increases over the years, it's going to cause more of an issue. But people, it's great that people want to go with electric cars and these other, I guess, alternative sources of energy for cars, but most of that electricity is coming from, a coal plant or possibly like something like a natural gas plant. I mean, of all the fossil fuels, natural gas is probably the most clean and best for the environment, but power plants, electric power plants, really needs to be the focus. This infrastructure of this country, the United States, and possibly other countries, especially China, but that's a whole different issue. It needs to be basically just a more firm foundation as far as going with renewable energy. And this ties in with the other issue that I see, is energy independence. I think that's, honestly, in my opinion, that's my motivating factor behind all this, that I think is probably the most important. Environmental issues are important, and especially in the long run, but at least even in the short run, and maybe in the long run, we have a massive problem, I think, in this country with energy, a lot of energy being sourced out, petroleum products being sourced out from other countries. And it's great for the countries that produce it. They make a lot of money off of this, but I think there's a tendency, and this kind of ties in a little bit with U.S. foreign policy, and I'm not really going to get too much into that because it's a different topic, but the U.S. government has a tendency to have strong interests in areas and regions where these sources of petroleum come from, i.e. the Middle East. And we tend to meddle in people's affairs to affect elections, affect governments, and the outcomes that we want so that we have better stability. We're going to get cheap oil all the time, erecting pupper governments, supporting governments.
Certainly our foreign policy is related to our trade, international trade policy, all of our economic policy. And
it's extremely detrimental to this country to do that, and we cannot sustain meddling in people's affairs like that for our own benefit, because people hate us because of it, honestly, and it's not surprising, and even though I don't like that people hate us around the world, I can't really blame them. If I was them, I'd be in the exact same boat. I'd be angry as hell, the way to put it. So, energy independence won't solve those problems, but it could prevent other issues that we're going to have in the future with that. And hopefully after several generations, those issues over there will start to settle out a little bit more. I don't think they'll ever go away, because people won't forget, but energy independence will help us a lot in the foreign policy area, in my opinion. I think it's really important.
Certainly, but to be fair, our number one oil supplier is Canada. Our number 3 is Mexico, and we actually have in our country places where we can the reserves that we could potentially drill for, especially with the technology we have now, could likely exceed anything from any of the Middle Eastern countries we get oil from. And what's on the market now, I mean, there are twice as many million, billion, trillion barrels. I mean, all the amount of barrels of oil we have are it's twice as much as it was 3 decades ago. So it's not like we're running out of it. It's certainly out there. The best thing we could honestly do as far as getting off of dependence on foreign oil is to put more countries into the market with it, and especially ours, because of the resources and the technology that we have on it. Bottom line is, not only do we have taxes on this, but we've been subsidizing alternative energies all over the place. $23 a megawatt hour on solar and wind. That's compared with $1.59 for nuclear, 44 cents for conventional coal, 25 cents for natural gas. I mean, we're heavily subsidizing these alternate energies, and people still aren't using them. So I'm not sure exactly how much further we'd have to go, both in subsidizing and in taxing, before we're actually going to switch over, unless people actually have a sustainable technology. That's my bottom line on this. I don't think we should be messing with people's incentives on this one. We've got to let the market create the technology.
Well, my opinion regarding taxes.
And mine.
Yeah, I'm generally not a big fan of taxes, but the way I see this is it's an environmental issue for most people, but I also see this as a national security / foreign policy issue. So anyway, we're running out of time here, and I'd like to conclude this.
We just want to say, I mean, we agree on many things here. We have a lot of the same premises. We come to a different conclusion, but we hope that you'll just take what we both say with a grain of salt and come up with your own opinion on this.
Yeah, you want to be able to form your own opinions. Don't necessarily believe what someone tells you. Always question.
Just because we're always right doesn't mean you have to believe us.
Critically think. The kind of stuff that they should have taught you in school, but most people still can't grasp. But anyway,
yeah, that's another issue for another day.
Completely another issue. So
thank you for watching this week's episode, and we'll hope you tune in for next week's
Modern Times with Cal and Mike. Peace.
Walking the dirt road, driving my blues away.